number. Tadi pongkang di semte, kartam di kong ni song jendep nane, pongkang di sem dok di koli tam song, ne tang sanga ke ne tang ke le na si jong ba Dzambhala da de song mare, ni du che me jo. Na si la ko ko wa ri ki sanga ke ren pa song. Na si di no song ji di na de se ki nya la le shi. La shi ba de no ka sa de ti ma le shi. Ramji Shiva, Ramji Shiva Devili, Ramji Shiva Teta Sang Jermina, the taste of woman. He loved me, they pay Germany. So, oh, Saji, Mamatu Saji, Gondi, never in your mercy. Jenny Saji, Mari, Machiba Mado, Jew your money, Lakachi, Nanga, Nathan boy, that is Nanga, my Namba Shiva Saji, Lakari. 사지 가래 사지 셈리 셈 매라가 남아 말이 셈리 새로운 로그들이 낭바시 받는 낭 셈게 내록도 하고 낭 셈게 내록도 하고 내록도 나시 투바고는 매 건지로지나 셈게 내록 가서 셈도 남같이 하면은 산이디 성 나라이비 죽은 것도 좋아해 낭바지 사지 죽거리 남가르다 남가르 뒤는 하고 다 로르게 뛰는 바로 범이 따와라. 야, 범이 야설이 독신도 sak시가 따와 뛰는 밤에 랑가 하고 들이 랑가 따와 셈내로데 니지 작성만 셈남하다 뛰를 공되네. 당보고 들이 용 들이 또 들이 셈남하다 참. 들이 남가를 뛰시면 와지. 들이다 풍부 되는 때 마도 바가를 늘레스. 사롱을 강이 요레스. 되는데 대민 풍부 좀 남이라로 매일 가는 차공의 여성 다 잡서는 여성 다스와는 바 가까이만 쉽게 담지 샘디 처리 차롱 내가 로버 온저 로버 좀 이제 다 뒤책만 뒤는 로도 되는 이 풍부 되지 봐대 차롱의 동의 요리 단 로아를 두라 거기 잡도 르니 거와 계속 저기서 무슨 말이 뭐 정말 생이 되시도 모르리 속차 연인이 당 게임이 당일 셈이 미시에키 요리 파티 게임 뜻이나 살탐실라 끼와 요리 나와 요리 쇼아요 개발이 세야지 마서 감으로 대탐실 셉대 시에나 누구가에 감니 셈이 오미 하고 다 주고만 끼와 쇼아가 나와 끼와 용이 되네 셈이랑 이 남크랑이 참는 셈이 나와를 참는 로리 그래서 셈당 납시 때라서 와데 딱지만 보던 거리 셈이만 남가니까 차별해 내가 풍부도 남이 나르거든 나다 리더 것도 삼아 동해도 말 마팔로 돼서 마토드나 근데 마토드는 조기를 나타 동네 때에 좀 또는 나고 섬적대 대시발세 발들이 가당들이 풍부하다 시합대보는 양태한테 선거에 그래서 나이 왕극계를 대선 참을라가 공기송 대선 노제 걸어서 풍부랑 인시발 풍부대에서 무조건 나한테 도도들에서 나한테 도도인 날이 사람들이 양태한테 때 나한테 도도요 말 풍부지 속적 풍부 서로 풍부 누시적 풍부 납시적 풍부 없어 시합에서 탑지 마음으로 뒤지는 토들 말이 세면 풍부로리 네 가는 뒤에만 다 말이지 오늘 세부터 말이지 오늘 뒤에만 다 봐 세면을 다 따오면 다 따르면 그러요 말이 뒤다 다 되고 좀 마다 봐 다다 참에 무조 따고 나와는 상상 거리 참만 뒤에 담지만 다 봐. 니 용이 때마다 봐리 참아 니 매나티 따봐 도지 장지 니 매와디 세면 니 원 말이 대하고든지 설류에 다되어 풍공하지 샤더를 봐사 차저 오롱 조매 샘남카 대도 신정왕은 사강의 찌과 차대 대리도 대리를 접다는 점은 리게 섬 사야만 보여래 냠이 제 핑바를 섬지 맥직 되는 네 종디를 돌아 생급산 내로 통소는 선분범 차균이 오래 대탐지양 사기공을 타고 그랬어. 병 대다와서 루이드 선분범 차만 모여래. 그래서 선분까지 나타서 오래. 그래서 가격을 주서 오래. 야, 포화를 핑핑 버려 요래서 돼서 그랬어. 누가 버려 돼서 그랬어. 민심을 대다 다 치는 거 대다면 하고 누가 버려 가려다 용버렸지. 용버 또 강에서 달에서 다음에 봐라 달에서 다 강도 뛴다. 다 무슨 탐색이 되라. 다 니트를 밀지는 샘리. 야, 샘들 달에 샘들 가려고 샘들 내려오더라. 샘 내려 통 샘나 가다가 살고 해. 다 남칼이 니도게 딱 제다면 남칼이 요로 봐. 어느 남칼이 범바지나 범바지에 다 그러래. 속이래. 속이나 범바지에 떨어져나 남동관지 저거 진짜면 마땅 속차 이렇게 감섬들이 감섬생기 샘지 말아야지. 대학으로 세부대로 하거든. 들이 대고 그러면 내lok도는 저하고는 매지. 이만 내lok도 바로는 시랍사를 오르는지 시랍도 바로도서 저다 훌람장시에는 세부 내록 마도는 참하고 그래. 세부 내록 서로 참하고 송송 내록도 바로는 시랍사를 오르는 매서 말하려 가게 까다미 게시라 레히야비 파시 쪄송을 뛰는 내록도 바로는 시랍사를 오르는 매지. 내모랑 상을 빠른 24월 오르면서 내록도를 가리 팽으로 내록도나 너무와 각하 말이지. 그렇게서 그냥 매시 객자리 오면 그때 나기니 되는 거 보는 지만데 되는 차당이지 다 차롱 차당 그걸 좀 다 턱야금에서 오르네. 내록도를 다 차당 무슨 내몸이 실려더니 내몸만 탐지 시작하고 하고서 내가 지금 말이야. 유모는 촉투시 시당아. 야, 시당이 뭐지? 이럴 때, 남을 달 시당은, 시당을 하지? 시당 집을가로 가리도. 심피 싸고 차지. 배를 도비지, 아침은, 도가자 유니버시티 아침은, 시당하지 다, 동장 초과자 세야 버려. 찌어디, 매발이를 때. 까빨sab을 기어하는 고소적인 요발을 기어하고 어째 삼지를 해야지. 삼태도 돈이 들어가래. 돈이 가래. 단지매 봐지. 삼태 다음에 받으면 되려도 드니 메인지다고 산척스럽게 다지 메인 집이나 안절 대변인들이 남매라 대면인들 라이로는 다들 펑칸티 지던데 펑칸티 빠싱 맞지 비스마스만 레왕 토모지 막 유지해 봐. 저칸데 사마들이 펑pon가도 마다바는 차로 펑pon도 그래. 다 정말 세부 내용 통화 찝어가더니 lakang을 루미자들이 들이디 sakchi 강가면 무슨 거래. 까빠도 잡으면 많이 루미 찍으면 뭐 저는 세부 내용 통해서 랑마치 야기 탐지 사기. 이 말이 비송다들이 다 대하고 들이 다다도 마도 bak가는 다다 속본으로 다다면서 좋아 쪽으로 때는 용문도 하는 걸 잡아요. 심어요. 대탐지 잡아지 봐요. 하고 다기 이제 다 하고서 들이 대들이 다 펑보디 주제스 마타바레스 들 다지미서나 들이 펑보디 따티 펑다디 쪽에 따라할 거 잡으라고 거기에 담 때는 놈 들 나니 동치바 펑가치 같이 만드나 나니 펑보 같은 용왕 말레스 용왕 같은 하고도 따위 제도로 이시가레스 독면이 요성스 밀쳐버리지 대도 하고는 남 민주도 한 셈명이 거래 셈도 산쪽신 남아지게 매기 거래 다디데 그도 산쪽신 매나 대들이 그도 산쪽에서 사바체비밖에 이게 뭐지 이게 세바밖에 들이 다 돈은 다지니 좀 매봐 이게 집어질 다지니 매봐 하고 그래 이게 냐는지 뭐 동자를 hingi 열은 매시 우리는 코와요 말이에요. 차론디 코와리는 차론도 매요나 차론을 라기 로걸 좀 하고 그래서 차론도 쳐야 돼. 하고 다스 나시 라걸 코와지. 차론 타지 쳐야 돼. 그래서 용왕 안돼요. 생중왕아 대 낭님몽아 디랑우레스 오 대사와지 신아지 따하고서 탐치 내가 주마타거지 다 졌다 나와 탐치랑 그 샘지 라리 소비면은 그래도 사진이 말 보셔서 너가 탐치는 졌다 나와 탐치랑 샘 때 따가래 니신 라리 소비면 맞더니 참아 되는 줄 가리를 라리 소비면 되는 파도 그러면 저때 돈 내때도 됐잖아 같이 탐치 라리 소비면 되도 상하나 하고서 들이다 라리 소비면 자세 버리더서 딱 같이 이제 졌다 나와 탐치랑 그 샘질 딱 상하도 하고서 나와서랑 샘을 로를 들고 와서 들이다 고대니 성지 포함인수로 상계지 대리를 상계의 말을 생긴 거만상 대다들이 랑펑펑집이 대다 상하 주지시 펑펑집식 시바 우리 예대는 성이 대하고서는 설수고도 매고 양다는 나오냐면 당시에 따지 저하고 들으라고 들이 다과지 이제는 다과래 들 다과지 말고 잘로 되게 우지 쭉벌어 되는 남이 뭔가지 시간 저들 살들이 오지 때는 집아 이동마 저기 뭐 때라서 와 세꾸지 이동마 때는 난 동다 때리 동치와 들이 자와 탑을 켜가고 되더라 이들이 파시 쪽또 때라서 같은 게 저거지는 정말 상대요래 때때는 들이다 대다고 하고는 들이람매들 대다고 레들 이제 동대하고 들이들 로를 저 나진이지 찍고대 정수는 레레 정도 나진이면도 사하고 짓다보면 대들 나도 가리샤나 되거니 님도 다 하고서는 다른 수발 하고 그러 대를 하고서는 나도 대중물이면 그래도 자티 누바당도 해랑은 누바당도 때문에 따라 해랑은 누바당도 자티 그나게 말해 자키 제로더티와 투당이 보는 다만이 가요 geb도 거자 데 차지지 몰라 말은데 그까지 콘타메 받을 때 그런데 주민이 왜 됐어 말아 자키 피다게 요래 사적팀이 좋아지 그래 자 누바시마 탐지게 주바테 요래 개별로 저도 자세라스 대답을 누지 탐지는 지대당 통라에서 믿는 가성 하 책대지 뭐 자답지 좋아레스 주바고사레스 세당 제열면 주바살고 따텔고 자케 주바테 그죠 니그 삼제되고 니그 배고 고집 삼제 좀 니그 제리도 딱 하나 이러면 소들을 로마 탐지 제일 뭐 나한테 그래. 야, 아줘야 뭐 나한테 그래. 델티 데이터면 델 삼행지 데이터가 삼행지 제가 이게 저들을 사봤으면 이제 집에 다 니한테는 다들 차당이나 그래. 저거 삼제 그래. 저거 조바테 그래. 삼제가 조 숨기 조바래. 델티 다들 세 다기 니들 공부돼. 랑지 다 이제는 맞다고 하고 풍부도 좀 나면은 그리 남자한테 생네 대 내록시서나 답에는 사했거든 거나 네 마디는 송우리 마디 솔드는 송우리 고대 그제서 보도진지 돈이 온다 내가 담게 돈이 줘봐 샘 대식 공부고 현도 그래 될 이제는 가르샤나 살초 그래 라크레샤나 그 독들이 세 리지벌 사는 거지 대다가 슬라트레스게 잡대 쳐보면 그것도 양도 되나 드리디오 다음 구석이 이동하더니 무엇다 무슨 개긴지 요래 언제 길마세 그다음에 긴지 탕칸데 자치 작대로 탕칸이 사원 아동 통을 콩을 쳤다면서 그랬다 그래 저 탕칸데 저걸 먹겠다는 다 샘을 슬라트레 찌와라 길이들 다 뒤당이 정도 그래 다라도 세면들이 되냐 라도 세면 있으면 맞아야 대신 라그리 지로래 될 풍부도 좀 남의 나를 줘 나도 풍부도 누구보다 노동을 말했지 내 동시배들이 딱 올라줘야 되나 올라오면서 Tata Malam can Malama says to the Lamsa, me, Pama, Nikon, the Lam to Tree, but I can Nipa, Church Mata, Lam to Lam to Oman baby home, Lab Gossom, Malama Sati, they did Nipani, Nitoke, the district ni Cockmore, they more machine, Church Mata. Totally material batting, take it to road corner, now never, my says somewhere, they married. They were lamps of woman women, you need lamps of change, that was about constantly. Oh, that come the top of me, but Chatama, look at all. They will probably do to Nami Lara Troll, the end the young to go, the end the Tapatani, that was the Fiji, the tattoo, the oh, could you really don't worry. Pero 사다버렸더니 재미 발라서 말이지. 사다버렸더니 처럼 저 발라서 대상보다 다리 깨는 게마다 다과 다리인데 양다기인들이 그냥 이게 다과 이렇게 들이 다 놓으래 별로. 이마게 다리자. 야, 저런 줘봐. 대타로 담지고. 그게 뭐니? 이게 다뭐 대타고 하고 그러더니 남미 자발이 샘데미네. Rapidly, that means GP Roger, GP Lotte, Tonga de Malagati, or Hakon. There is not me, the long same did not mean that is in. There is said Yatunda Tatum. Yatunda that top with Julius. So I took symptom drive a top with Julia. Yatunda was okay. Or Deram Yatunda, that was take away his own. Madame Julia, that tongue, Tamalam was so glory. So we watch it down, ages of the Mato ages of the telling me more to the current over it. Dajin in the mammy, Dajin, Chadang in the mammy, they part of the Minyon got it. Now Saji and Charom the Major part, Jatin and the Guard over it. They thought some people do so Nami Lara. So the young day on the young Sour Lemon, Lamy, the the Damtier got the young that home she lost over. So I tell Lamsi, they don't take the same about Gomla, they got a lot of home. They took it, got not to carry Charlotte, home goes and not what the toddler sent the Thomas Sanchang Melon and his own. They just like Carretina, rather than eager to go. Say, because of Kakarman, sent the flight to Javai, Javatam is here on the tick, Taha was on Javai, or say like a Kassam, say, Zogris, Yatuto, Kamakada territory, and sent the thing like a go away, Lama, he go much also. Lama send the Lama to send the Lama send the Nima. The haste on the theatre, Jerem Tajan, so also, this lot of the Ram, you get the old tolerate, Tat in the matter of it. It probably do to Nami or some that Jerem the Sour Unity, they tolerate.
So where were we? In the linear supplication, we already spoke about before about the three the three mandalas, or the three seeds mandalas. So that was on page 4, where we said the aggregates, elements, and sense sources, the three seeds, fill the Vajra channels and wheels. And so that is related now to the verse, not going to page 6. When conquered the demon of the aggregates, this body of fully ripened karma is liberated into the deity. And so there's one quote that I always mention. It's by Jigong Dhamaraja. And he said that when you recognize that everything that appears and exists is the deity, you have accomplished the generation stage of the secret mantra. So on the outer level, we have all that appears and exists, the universe, and then the inner sentient beings. and the outer and the inner both are the deity. So when we speak about the deity, what is the deity? It is not just like a person, for example, some kind of being, a certain being. But when we speak about deity, we speak about the divine nature of everything. That is why the universe has the nature of the deity, this divine by nature. Lord Jigten Sumgön had said that nothing can become something if it doesn't already exist on the basis. Nothing can become something only by looking at it. Meaning that, for example, if a Buddha didn't really exist, if we were to visualize a Buddha, we wouldn't become a Buddha. We couldn't. If he wouldn't already exist on the basis. So basically, when we are visualizing the deity, we're practicing the deity, we are not just fabricating something, but we are recognizing what already is, what is our true nature fundamentally. Well, sometimes people say, I'm a Buddhist, and he's not a Buddhist, and so on. But actually, what is a Buddhist? A Buddhist really is a Buddha. And what is Buddha? Buddha is the mind. So only something that wouldn't have a mind is not a Buddhist, ultimately. Because this term Buddhist means the true nature of your mind. And as we said, the omniscient Longchen Drupchen had said, when you realize the nature of your mind, there is no higher learning than that. And Milarepa said, when you realize that there is no difference between mind and space, you have actualized the Dharmakaya. So what we call Buddhist actually means inner, and therefore a Buddhist means a Buddha, and Buddha is the Dharmakaya, and the Dharmakaya is like space. It is just that ordinary beings have not recognized that. Then in order to recognize that, if one follows the scriptures and logical reasoning, then one can recognize that on the basis of the Madhyamaka or the middle way view. Or if one takes the approach of meditation, of practice, one can recognize that through the practices of Dzogchen or Mahamudra. But in brief, it comes down to the same thing, and that is that dualistic grasping must diminish. When dualistic grasping diminishes, the mind naturally is seen as like space. So it is something that we first need to understand, and then we need to experience it, and finally we need to realize it. We need to understand first that the mind is actually like space, and therefore within space there is no birth and no death. So not realizing this, our body, the aggregate, becomes like a demon, the Mara of the aggregates. That causes a lot of suffering. Just like an ice block, in a state of being an ice block, experiences a lot of suffering. But then when it matures, it is liberated into the deity. And so maturation means that the ice block has melted. And then there is no more separation between, for example, a Buddhist or not a Buddhist, the inner and the outer. Within space, there is no such division. So the Buddha had said, beings are only obscured by adventitious stains. So temporarily our mind is like an ice block, and that has the nature of suffering. Or as we mentioned before, Jigten Sumgön said, that which wanders in samsara is the body. For example, an insect, like an ant possesses also Buddha nature. All sentient beings, all living beings possess a mind. And actually, we could probably also say that even the so-called inanimate universe, for example, the trees, the various plants, the vegetations, they also actually one can make a case for saying that they have mind, because they also are born They grow old, when they grow dry, and then they die. They also go through such a process. So when we think about it in this way, we cannot simply say that they don't live, because there's also life, and therefore we say that the space-like nature of the mind is all pervasive, is everywhere. So it does not just refer to certain kinds of beings, but also the entire universe. And then when we look at our own mind, our own consciousness, and we analyze it, actually nowadays many scientists also analyze the consciousness. Actually, we find that there is nothing that is not pervaded by the consciousness. And the suffering that we experience, however, is experienced on the basis of the physical body. Marpa Lotsawa had said that when not realized, then this body, made of the 4 elements, is the basis of all sickness and pain and suffering. When realized, it arises as the unified form united with the deity. When we now look at our body, the aggregate, there are actually 5 aggregates if we dissect the aggregates. This is also actually clearly explained in the Heart Sutra. It explains the nature of these aggregates. Or when we receive the 4 empowerments, we are introduced to the 3 mandalas, the 3 seed mandalas, and that the wheels within our body are pervaded by deities, and therefore we possess a Vajra body. And also through the practice of Vajrakilaya, we recognize the nature of our aggregates. So ordinarily we think that the body, the aggregate of the body, is this solid, concrete thing that is me. So over and over again we label that body as the self, as me. And so when we dissect the 5 aggregates, there are 5. There is first the aggregate of form, the body, then the aggregate of feelings, the aggregate of perception, the aggregate of karmic formation, and the aggregate of consciousness. So this is explained clearly in the Heart Sutra. So aggregate means something, many things coming together, like a heap of things, like a heap of sand, for example. And whenever we have many things coming together, we have a compounded phenomenon, and all compounded phenomena are impermanent by nature. However, the mind itself will endure, is permanent. But a heap of sand, for example, now is a heap of sand, and the next moment the wind takes it away and disperses the sand. So all compounded phenomena are impermanent. We learned that already in the context of practicing the ngundro, the preliminaries. We learned that everything is impermanent. So once we have 2, like a duality, it is bound to be impermanent. Only when there is non-duality, in a state of non-duality, there is permanence, and that is the enduring state of the Buddha Vajradhara, the ultimate mind where there is no duality. So when we look at our outer body is comprised of the 5 elements. The flesh, for instance, is the earth element, the blood is the water element, our breath is the wind element, the body heat is the fire element, and the mind is the space element. Actually, one person's body, is exactly the same as the entire universe, as this whole planet, for example. And then when we look closer into our body actually is composed of many billions of microorganisms, many tiny little life forms. And scientists often speak about beneficial and harmful microorganisms. So it is said in the Dharma now that within our body we possess 1,200,000 kinds of microorganism. And when a person becomes liberated from dualistic grasping and and sees the nature of their mind, attains enlightenment, it is said that all of these microorganisms will also attain enlightenment. On the other hand, there is also ordinarily, there are harmful microorganisms that create discomfort and disease, sickness. So scientists make this division between beneficial bugs and harmful bugs. And they say, for example, there are these beneficial microorganisms, these bugs that live in our stomachs and that we need to nurture. We need more of those. And then there's harmful bugs that we need to kill, we need to get rid of, so that we don't get sick. But ultimately, so what are these harmful bugs? It really are the afflictive emotions in our own mind. And the afflictive emotions ultimately arise from believing in a self that does not actually exist. And so we all have this perception of a self. So when we analyze, so what is that self, then we might think that the person who is that self is the mind of that person. So we think that the self is somewhere in our mind. But so then when you look at the nature of your mind and you see the nature of your mind, the mind also becomes like space. And within space, there is no duality. We cannot make delineation between beings in space. Or for example, if you have two vases, it is like having two bodies. And when these two vases are broken, then the inner emptiness contained in each vase becomes all one. It's all one and the same. And likewise, the minds of all beings in the three realms of samsara, humans, animals, and so forth, is all one and the same. So, therefore, Longchen Rabjam had said, if you realize the nature of your mind, there is no higher learning than that. And Milarepa said in the context of teaching the 10 parameters to Kadamba Geshe, he said that aside from realizing the nature of your mind, there is no other perfection, parameter of wisdom than that. So the perfection of wisdom is a realization of the nature of mind. No matter how much we study and learn about the perfection of wisdom, and unless we realize the nature of our mind, we will never be able to fully comprehend and know everything. But when you know the nature of the mind, you will know everything. And so also in the context of teaching the 10 parameters, Milarepa said, when the falsehood of the afflictive emotions is seen or exposed, there is no other perfection of primordial wisdom than that. So what is the benefit of realizing the nature of the mind? It is that one matures one's afflictive emotions into primordial wisdom. So there is actually no real a separate afflictive emotion that exists. It is said that even the name, even the concept of obstructing or misleading exists. It is said in our Vajrakilaya text. All these fixations to a concrete existence and thoughts of attachment and aversion are what create our suffering. They are the ice blocks that create all of our suffering. The moment you realize the nature of mind, all these afflictions are transformed. They become primordial wisdom. And then the affliction will no longer cause any suffering. There will be no more harm created. The strongest of all afflictions is the affliction of hatred. And we get angry, for example, at those enemies that we dislike. But what happens to your mind when your mind is in a state of extreme anger? The mind is extremely clear at that time. And the anger also has the power to destroy all the other thoughts. For example, if you had a friend that you have loved for a very long time, one day you get angry at them and you start hating each other. you might start fighting and even hit each other and even kill each other. All the love has gone instantly. So it is said that the roots of virtue accumulated in aeons is destroyed by a single moment of anger. So the root of virtue here is the mind of love. And that is also connected to emptiness, because emptiness is the state where self-grasping is absent. And it is attained, the state of emptiness is attained through the virtue of love, through the altruistic mind. And so through the altruistic mind, the demon of the aggregate actually ripens into the deity. And so there are many explanations on the deity present within our aggregates. It is said that the aggregates, the aggregate of the body, are the aggregates and the elements are the male and the female Buddhas. The sense sources are and their objects. The sense perceptions and their objects are the male and the female bodhisattvas. And then the brains and joints and so forth are the male and the female, and the organs are the male and the female wrathful ones. First, the 5 aggregates are in an ice-like state, in an impure state. But then when we generate the deity and we begin to see our true nature, which is like turning on the light in a temple, and finally you get to see all the beautiful arrangements inside of the temple. In the Ganges Mahamudra text, it says, "The darkness of 1,000 aeons is dispelled by a single lamp flame." So when you just see the nature of the mind, you see that you yourself are the Buddha, and moreover, you see that all beings are actually Buddha. So remember these instructions by Milarepa. And so at the time when we have not realized the nature of the mind, we grasp at the true existence of our bodies and are attached to the sense objects perceived by the 6 sense sources. We develop afflictive emotions and clinging attachment. So these need to be recognized. And so then when you look at your mind that recognizes this, and you recognize the view that is that there is no self and no other, then the aggregate, or the mar of the aggregate, will mature. So the aggregate, again, is a compounded phenomenon and therefore impermanent by nature. When self-grasping diminishes, naturally the grasping at the aggregate will also diminish. And that is the purpose of visualizing the Yidam deity, or practicing the generation stage. And when you practice the generation stage, it is important to understand the inner meaning of the generation stage, of this visualization. So for example, how your body and the elements are the Buddhas and the consorts and so forth. And also it is said that the 5 aggregates are actually the 5 afflictive emotions. That is, when you recognize the afflictive emotions and seal them with the view, they become the 5 wisdoms. Then you are transforming poison into medicine, into great medicine. So when we here speak about the body, fully ripened karma is liberated into the deity. So the full maturation, how we mature, is through the mind. So what needs to mature first is the mind. The mind matures through the twofold bodhicitta. First, self-grasping matures into the relative bodhicitta of immeasurable love. When immeasurable love arises, then immeasurable compassion will arise. And when immeasurable compassion arises, the grasping at self and other will diminish. In the Yamantaka practice, it also says no real object of compassion exists. So ultimately, samsara appears, but it is not actually real. So samsara is like this ice block, but there is no real ice block because the ice really is water. So even though we do experience suffering in samsara, it is an adventitious state. It is not our true nature. Our true nature is Buddha nature, or the true nature of ice is water. And so in this is how we understand this quote by Dhammaraja, that all appearance and existence is the divine form of the deity, or all ice blocks are actually water. So on the outer level, we have the 5 elements. On the inner level, the 5 afflictive emotions. And the 5 outer elements are a reflection of our inner afflictive emotions. And then secretly, the 5 afflictive emotions are actually the 5 kinds of primordial wisdom. So when one realizes the view, one sees that everything that appears is illusory by nature. In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, therefore it says in verse number 22, appearances are one's own mind. And this is also what the other day when I was listening to teachings by Sangye Nyempa Rinpoche, what he was speaking about. Exactly that. And that actually within that verse and in generally all the verses of the 37 practices, everything is contained. There is nothing aside from the 37 practices. Everything can be, all the teachings that you receive can be condensed into the 37 practices. And that is why it is said that the 37 practices are so precious. So appearances are one's own mind. When you understand that, you have actually understood everything about the secret mantra, the Vajrayana. So our confused perceptions arise momentarily. We are temporarily controlled by confusion, and this is what leads to the arising of samsara. When samsara matures, it matures into nirvana. On the Samantabhadra prayer, it says, when you recognize it, you are a Buddha. Not recognizing it, you are a sentient being wandering in samsara. There are also many explanations on the nature of the aggregates, sense sources, and elements found in the various classes of Tantra. For example, in our lineage supplication prayer. And so understand this and then habituate to it over and over again. And eventually, through such habituation of your body as the deity, the fixation to this ordinary me, the self, will become purified eventually. So that is the significance of visualizing the deity, the color and the ornaments, the implements and so forth of the deity. For example, within a single implement of the deity, such as the crown ornament made of the 5 dried skulls, is all-inclusive in meaning. This crown ornament, for instance, is a sign of the 5 afflictions having transformed into the 5 kinds of wisdom. And then all the other parts of the deity have a very specific meaning. So on the outer level, the deity appears with great magnificence and a very beautiful appearance. But each of these elements that make up the deity's appearance has a very precise meaning. And it also is one of the skillful methods of the Buddha for us to understand. For example, different parts of the deity represent the 6 paramitas or the 10 powers and so forth. So, for example, we have the various wrathful ornaments of the deity and the various implements which all have a very specific meaning. So ultimately, what they refer to is the destruction of dualistic grasping at self and other. So when we then look at the deity, and we visualize in this way, for example, a certain ornament, we come to the realization that this means non-duality. There is no self and other. And once you have understood that by looking at the deity, you continue to remain within this view. And then as you remain within this view, whatever thought or emotion arises, because you are sustaining the view, you also recognize the emotion or the thought as non-dual, as your own confusion, and lacking any true existence. When you understand that, you will no longer blame anyone for anything, because you will recognize it is all the fault of the afflictive emotion. And we get angry at enemies, people we dislike, but really, when those people, there are certain people who encounter us with hatred, and that is not the fault of the person per se, it is the fault of the hatred, of their anger. What is causing harm when we speak about harmful enemies is not really the enemy themselves, but it's the hatred, it's the afflictive emotion in their mind. The enemy themselves, actually, they don't do anything on their own without the affliction of hatred. Jigme Lingpa also had said that now to one who has realized that all enemies and obstructors are actually enhancements to one's practice. All obstructions are an encouragement to engage in virtuous practice. So actually, from this perspective, there are no real enemies, and they are all helping friends. Those so-called harmful enemies are the ones who give us patience. Again, in the 37 practices, it says, to those who desire a wealth of virtue, all those who do harm are like a precious treasure. So when you encounter an enemy and remember these words, then you recognize that actually this is not an enemy, this is a friend. This is a support from me to cultivate patience. It is also said that if there's no one who triggers our anger, how would we cultivate patience? Who would we cultivate patience for? So those so-called enemies really give us the gift of patience. And then our near ones, our loved ones, give us the gift of love. So for example, giving of love, for example, I, an old man, I'm also feeding the birds, and I'm giving out candies or food, like handouts and so on, which is kind of like giving them love. And then if you cultivate love, then also that arises in the mind of the other person, and it diminishes their attachment and aversion, their self-grasping. So this is how we should see it. There is really either those who give us the gift of love, and those who give us the gift of patience. So then, when we now coming back to the aggregate, when we look at the outer aggregate of the body that we consider the self, so recognizing this view that we had mentioned before, you recognize that fundamentally this aggregate of the body does not inherently exist. And on the basis of this recognition, you visualize the form of the deity. So understanding your true nature, you visualize the form of the deity. In the supplication prayer of the fivefold path of Mahamudra, it says that the Vajradhara is the creator of all samsara and nirvana, and that the deity is established primordially within oneself, so within one's Buddha nature. That is your true nature. And because you possess Buddha nature, anything at all can appear. And so on the relative level, what appears is this karmic body of karmic imprints. But then when great love arises and you remember the deity, the beautiful form of the deity over and over again, then this ordinary body of karmic formation will become purified. We had this, at the monastery, we had this teacher, a chant master, and in 1981, when the Yamantaka Tanka re-emerged from below the ground, he was so touched that he started to cry. And so why was he, people were asking, why are you crying when you see a Tanka? But it is because of the great love that he had for the deity. He felt the love of the deity, and that made his self-grasping diminish. And in that moment, he becomes indivisible from the deity. So this is what happens when we really bring the deity to mind, and we visualize the deity. We forget about our ordinary body, and then this ordinary body ripens into the deity. So we need to practice the generation stage on the basis of understanding the true nature of the deity. That this is our true nature, and that we are not this solid entity of the self that we thought we were. Also, when you habituate to visualizing the deity, it will carry over into your dream state when you are sleeping. This is taught in the context of the teachings on luminosity. The way to practice with that is that as you fall asleep remembering the deity, visualizing the deity, or hearing the Varakilaya mantra, for instance. So fall asleep within that state, and then the moment you wake up, again remember the deity. So some say remember Om Mani Padme Hum, the moment you wake up. And this is similar to recognizing luminosity during the dream state. So normally when we fall asleep in a deep sleep state, we don't recognize our Buddha nature. But to practice this recognition, we can remember the deity the very moment we wake up from sleeping. And normally when we wake up from sleeping, we are putting on our old clothing of the self. We are thinking, I have slept. The I comes in immediately. So instead of thinking I, think of Chandresik, for example, and the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. And this is like putting on new clothing. So all negative karmic imprints, all these habitual tendencies, they dwell within our concept of the body. So when that is exchanged for the deity, then also these karmic imprints do not exist. That is why we habituate over and over again to the deity. And along with visualizing the deity, we also need to recollect the pure meaning of the deity's appearance. For example, that is explained very clearly in the praise of signs in the Yamantaka practice. It explains very clearly the meaning of each ornament and implement and so forth of the deity. For example, the wristlets, the bracelets of the deity represent the paramita of generosity, and then the anklets represent the paramita of discipline, ethical discipline, and so forth. So if you bring all of this to mind as you visualize the deity, then naturally you will also purify whatever obstructs you from attaining these paramitas of generosity or diligence and ethical discipline, patience, and so forth. So again, if you understand this is how the mind matures. And again, when we speak about maturation, it's really the mind that needs to mature. The mind first must mature through the altruistic mind, and then the altruistic mind matures into the ultimate truth, where you realize the non-duality of self and others. When there is no more concept of duality of self and other in your mind, then the body manifests as the pure illusory form, appearing like a rainbow in the sky. So the matured body that matures out of bodhicitta manifests as the rainbow body of the deity. So that is the pure illusory body. And then there is the impure illusory body, which is our solid body that we think is so solid, and that we think is ourselves. And that impure illusory body is also the body that we experience in our dream states, or the mental body of the bardo. The mental body of the bardo brings with it all the afflictive emotions, the 6 afflictions. And so due to that, the bardo consciousness experiences much suffering and continues to wander in the ocean of samsaric suffering. So that is the significance of visualizing the form of the deity over and over again. Either we think of the guru, or we visualize the form of the yidam, or we just bring to mind the seed syllable, such as hong or shri and so forth. If you habituate to that, then the self-grasping, the grasping at the body as a self, will gradually diminish. And as a skillful method, that is also why we print the hung syllable on T-shirts and different objects. So we always reminded that whenever a thought arises in our mind, we think of the hung. And that hung has the power to destroy that thought. And when there is no negative thought in the mind is pure, like a clear mirror. And then within that state of purity, like a clear mirror, whatever deity you visualize, you will naturally accomplish the deity. And it doesn't matter which deity you practice, because ultimately it is said within the expanse of primordial wisdom, all the Buddhas are one. If you sustain the view, all the deities are the same. And on the outer level, a multitude of deities appears like rainbows in the sky. They appear according to the specific needs of sentient beings. Also, it is said in the scriptures that it is of a greater benefit to think of the guru with devotion once than to visualize 100,000 deities. And so that is even more supreme. So in any case, when you practice the generation stage, visualize the deity from within an understanding of the view, the nature of the mind. And from within that, the deity will naturally manifest. This view is like the sun that illuminates your true nature as being the deity. So this is the quality, these are the qualities of practicing the generation stage, and this is how we should practice it.
From the mantra garland I raised, and the second garland issued forth, passing from my mouth into the mouth of the consort. The self-resounding mantra came by the inconceivable dakas and dakinis in the consorts for chakras or houses the mind stream. From the consort secret place, the mantra garland enters my vajra, and the deities residing within my channels proclaim the sound of the mantra. I visualize the mantra garland dissolving ceaselessly into my heart. Om Vajrakilaya Jahum Bam Ho Gatam Kaye Jaye Vijay Ajite Abarasite Marasena Barmadanai Zarwa Bignem Bam Hong Be Om Vajrakilaya Jahum Bam Ho Gatam Kaye Jaye Vijay Ajite Abarasite Marasena Barmadanai Sarva Bignem Bam Hong Be Hom Vajrakilaya Jahum Bam Ho Gatam Gaye Jaye Binjay Hajite Abarasite Marasena Parmadanai Sarva Bignem Bam Hong Be Hom Vajrakilaya Jahum Bam Ho Gatam Gaye Jaye Binjay Hajite Abarasite Jide Marasena Brahmadanai Sarva Bignem Bam Hong Be Hom Vajrakilaya Laya Jahum Bam Hokatam Gaye Jaya Bidyaye Hadidaya Barazi Marazina Barmadana Yezawa Bidlim Bam Hoinde Om A A I I U U Re Re Le Le E E Ang A Kaka Kakanga Cha 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 Na Ta 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 Na Ta 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 Na Ba 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 Ma Yara Lawa Sha Sa Sa Hak Sa So Ha A A I I U Re Re Le Le E E O O A Kaka Kakanga Cha 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 Nya Ta 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 Na Ta 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 Na Ba 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 Ma Yara Lawa Sha Ka Sha Hak Sa A A I I U Re Re Le Le E E O A Kaka Kakanga Cha 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 Nya Ta 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 Na Ta 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 Na Pa 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 Ma Yara Lawa Sha Sa Sha Hak Sa So Ha Vajrazato Samaya Manobalaya Vajrazato Tvenoba Tizadridam Hebawa Sudojayom Hebawa Subojayom Hebawa Anuraktam Hebawa Zarva Zedem Hedrayata Sarva Karma Zuzam Zizam Reyam Guru Ho Ha 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 Ho Abagawa Zarva Dada Gata Vajramame Manja Vajrabawa Mahasamaya Sato Vajrazato Samaya Manobalaya Vajrazato Denoba Dizadridam Hebawa Sudogayam Hebawa Subogayam Hebawa Anurakam Hebawa Sarva Siddhim Hebrayasa Sarva Karma Sujam Siddham Shriyam Guru Ha 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 Ho Bhagawa Dharvatata Kata Vajra Mame Manja Vajra Baba Mahasamaya Sato Vajrazato Svamaya Manubalaya Vajrazato Tvenopa Tishdadvidam Hebawa Sudojayom Hebawa Subokayom Hebawa Anuraktam Hebawa Sarva Siddhim Hebraya Cha Sarva Karma Sujam Zizam Shriyam Guru Ha 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 Ho Bhagawa Zarvatata Gata Vajra Mame Manja Vajri Bhava Mahasamaya Zato Homye Dharma Hetu Prabhava Hetu Tekam Tata Gato Hayavati Tesham Chayo Neroda Hevamadi Maharshmanaya Soha Homye Dharma Hetu Prabhava Hetu Tekam Tata Gato Hayavati Tesham Chayo Neroda Hevamadi Maharshmana Soha Homye Dharma Hetu Prabhava Hetu Tekam Tata Gato Hayavati Tesham Chayo Neroda Hevamadi Mahashramanaya so glorious great Vajrakilaya and divine God, please come here. I make out her inner and secret offerings. I praise your body, speech, mind, qualities, activities. I confess transgressions, heedlessness, and confusions, vows marked broken. Lovingly consider me with compassion. Please grant all accomplishments to me. Page 36. Gurus, knowledge holders, deities, dakinis, and oath-bound ones gathered like clouds in the sky. Through the power of your pasamaya, please consider us with love and shower down great blessings upon this mandala and us yogis. Please send down great blessings and great waves of compassionate activities upon this unsurpassed secret mandala of accomplishment. Please send down great enlightened body, speech, mind, blessings, grand supreme by wisdom's empowerment. Om Sarva Tata Tata Snagavan Samaya Ho Samaya Zan. Time has come to grant empowerment and send down blessings from the secret sphere of Vajrakilaya victorious. Vajra Lord with pious pledge you as though one surpassed Vajra empowered men. Deity who sing low this to give unwavering protection bestow. Blessings of all victors on us, please. Varakilaya sarva bignan mam hum be. Om Vajrakilaya sarva bignan mam hum be. Om